Your whole life you make plans. Plans to find that someone special and plans to work toward retirement.
Then something unexpected happens that could ruin it all. Now what's your plan? Call Michaels and Smolak today. We have a game plan, the better game plan.
I know everything that went on with him, including his issues.
Today, Syracuse University Chancellor Nancy Cantor wrote a letter to the editor responding to criticism from the USA Today about how Syracuse University handled the Bernie Fine scandal. Cantor writes, quote, "Had that tape surfaced in 2003, Fine would have been fired. Had we been given the tape in 2005, we would have gone straight to the authorities." She goes on to say those who held onto the tape for nearly 10 years owe everyone an explanation, end quote.
And joining us to talk about the tape and the decision to hold on to it is communications law professor Joel Kaplan from the Newhouse School. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with where we just ended with Chancellor Cantor. What are your thoughts about her shifting the blame at the end of that letter away from maybe the university or the police to the news reporters?
Well, I'm absolutely astounded by that statement. Her administration, her lawyer, conducted an investigation in 2005 where they talked to Bobby Davis. What kind of an investigation would you go through where you would not have asked him for any corroborating evidence? You know, they asked for other people and they checked it and they couldn't find them. Didn't they ask? Did you have any other proof that this happened? I'm sure if they'd asked that, he would say, oh yeah, I have a tape that I made with Laurie Fine. So this raises enormous questions about what kind of investigation they did in 2005, the so-called 4-month investigation. An investigation, I note, that they still refuse to release. So if she says that the news media owes an apology, which I don't believe they do, let's see the investigation. Let's see how thorough this university actually did this, or whether or not they actually whitewashed this investigation, which is what a lot of people think, because they've whitewashed other investigations when it comes to this university and when it comes to sports teams.
With that in mind, the public is out there, though, saying the opposite of what your position is, especially in the last several days since the shock of the tape has settled in a little bit on Sunday. They're now saying ESPN and the Post-Standard, how could they dare have held on to this tape for all these years? What if there are other victims? And what's the answer to that from a journalism point of view?
I think that the people then really don't understand the role of journalists and what we try to do in our society. People come to journalists for different reasons than they go to police or they go to the district attorney. Journalists don't have subpoena power, they don't have other power, but sometimes they can protect sources. In this case, there was no anonymous sources, he was on the record. But perhaps they feel as though they'll get a better hearing from a journalist. The last thing a journalist wants to do is be an arm of the government, because then they don't need to go to journalists. They might as well just go straight to the police. They might want to confide in a journalist about some things they've done that they don't want the police to know, or the DA, or they think that a journalist might dig further than a police officer. Police have subpoena power and other power, but journalists can sometimes get more and different information. But sources and other people don't want to think that as soon as I talk to you, Matt, you're going to run and pick up the phone and talk to Chief Fowler or talk to Mr. Fitzpatrick. You are going to do your own investigation, make your own conclusions. Now, what the Post-Standard should have done is urged him to take the tape to the police. And I'm sure they probably did do that. But for them to actually take a tape they got in the process of news gathering and bring it to the police would be totally inappropriate.
What about those that are saying that you have a moral obligation? A person hearing this tape would have a moral obligation because it does allude to boys being sexually abused in the tape to tell someone.
Yeah, well, they had a moral obligation to do everything in their power to check this out. And they did. They spent 6 months on this. I mean, people criticize the news media all the time and the newspaper all the time. They spent 6 months and didn't do anything with it because it did not meet the standards for publication. There's also, you also have a moral obligation to potential, to the person being accused.
To harming them.
Yeah, you want to make sure before you go out there, and that's what they want to do. Remember, they were by themselves. There was no police. There was not like the Penn State case where you had a grand jury report. If they were going to write this, they were going to stand on their own. And what if it turned out not to be true? They didn't have any corroboration. And even that tape, as they say, if you listen closely, the loop isn't closed. There is not a specific say where she said, yes, I saw you being molested.
And even on that tape, that wouldn't exist unless the Post-Standard had done its investigation.
Right, and they asked them to actually make the tape. I mean, the tape exactly wouldn't have existed. Can you prove this? I'm sure they said, they go, well, I could try to talk to Laurie Fine. I mean, a lot of people say, why didn't he try to talk to Bernie Fine? And maybe he did or not. It seems to me that would be the more logical thing. But he talked to Laurie, and he got a lot of stuff on that tape. But both news organizations, not just the Post, but ESPN, also listened to the same tape, and both came to the same conclusion. And at that point, you can say, and if they had, and the police did know about this. And you know, where's the police worried about? Where's their moral judgment about protecting these people?
And Joel Kaplan from Newhouse, thank you. We appreciate you stopping in. A lot of issues on this story.
Absolutely.
We'll have to have you back again before it's all over. Thank you.
And for updates 24/7 on the Bernie Fine investigation, just log on to cnycentral.com. We'll also have the link to Nancy Cantor's letter to the editor commenting on the tape. Just click on our story on the homepage for the information.